So now we are discussing the second process of project time management, and it is define activities. Now activities are kind of atom of project time management. If we misidentify any particular activity, we miss managing it and we miss the complete part of that work, because activities are the atomic elements which helps us in managing and creating the schedule. Now the define activities process gives us a list of activities and milestones. So if we look in the language of inputs and outputs, the define activities gives us a list of activities. Now this activity list can be of sorted, and you may identify various attributes to explain the particular activities. Now the attributes may depend upon your organization template. We have been talking about schedule management plan, so it depends. We will be discussing how we identify those elements, but you might be having some templates which drives that these all attributes should exist in your activities. So the first output of defined activities is that we get list of activities. Now this list of activities are detailed by attributes. So we can have an attribute like activity ID, we can have an attribute like activity description, we can have an attribute like type of activity. Now this type of activity I will talk a bit more. We can have attribute which defines a predecessor, we can have attribute which defines successor, we can have attribute which define any constraint attached to the particular activity, assumptions attached to the activity, etc., etc. So we can have n number of attributes which are associated with a given activity. Now all these attributes will not get filled as an output of this particular process, because as of now we may not be knowing the details of successors and predecessors of all those activities. But if the information is available, for example, if we know that before dispatching the product we need a brochure, we can identify as the dependency here, and even we can, if we already know that this activity, the dispatch has to happen before a particular date, then we can put the constraint information in that particular activity row. So the list of activities get generated out of this define activities process. The define activity process also gives us another output, which is a milestone list. So milestone, you may recognize milestone as a diamond, because many of the scheduling processes software represents milestone as a diamond. Milestone is something which signifies that there is an essential, there is an important event, and which will signify a completion or some step, some achievement. For example, like signing off of a requirement document. So this requirement got freezed, and this could be a milestone. And sometimes these milestones are also linked with payments. Usually, in order to achieve the milestones, we need to finish n number of activities. So once we are done with those activities, once those activities are completed and accepted by the respective stakeholders, we can say that this particular milestone has been achieved. Now milestones could be of two types. One is mandatory milestones. Now mandatory milestones are usually coming out of project charter or in contract which is another source of a project charter. If our customer is expecting something to be done, and that is something which may also get related with our payments or some constraints, those stages or those milestones are mandatory milestones. Now there could be some optional milestones also. From our template, from our historical informations, we might be getting some recommendation that in a project we should have these many milestones. Now those milestones we may apply in our project or we may don't. So those can become as an optional milestone. In general, milestone in a software tools are represent as a zero duration activity. So we don't do anything in that particular stage, but once we are done with n number of activities, then we say this milestone is complete. Example like sign off of requirement document, design baseline if you're talking about software. If you talk about construction industry, maybe the pilot launch, like sample ready, architecture ready, etc. So these could be the another milestones which can be communicated to a bigger stakeholders. Now milestone list also has an importance for communication, because milestones are such a summary level crucial points. Majority of stakeholders will understand about them, and the stakeholders who are not interested or who are not concerned about the detailing of the project may monitor the project just by looking at the milestone list or a milestone chart, which gives us that which milestone is coming at a which particular date, and are we in control, are we on time for those particular milestones. Now there was one point which I said, that type of activities I will discuss at length. In projects we have three types of activities. Now defined activities process identify all types of activities. These three types of activities are level of effort, discrete effort, and apportioned effort. Now the discrete effort is a type of activities which generate output, means they are directly producing deliverables. So the activities, for example, if you take a software development example, the coding is a discrete effort because it generates the required output which will be consumed by the end customer. So discrete effort, the activities which directly contribute to the output are discrete effort. Apportioned effort are type of activities which are not producing the output directly, but they are ensuring that discrete effort is going in a right direction, means quality assurance, quality control. So those are the activities which are required to assure that discrete effort is in the right direction. And this apportioned effort type of activities are dependent on discrete effort type of activities. So we cannot have an only apportioned effort activity because they will not produce any output, because they need input from a discrete effort. Third type of activities is level of effort. Now level of effort are the type of activities which gives a framework to a project. For example, if you are doing a project monitoring meeting, so now you need to identify that as an activity list that we would be conducting a project status review every Saturday. Now this project status review does not produce anything and does not verify anything, but it is required to give an environment and a framework where discrete effort and apportionate effort can work. So level of effort are the type of activities which are in general a kind of support which gives a framework under which discrete and apportionate effort activities can be done. Now in order to give this output, in general when we talk about input tools and technique and output process language, we need some informations. Then only we can generate an activity list and identify some of their attributes, or we can generate a milestone list. So what all inputs do we need in order to define the activities or identify the activities? First thing is, as usual, is our schedule management plan, because the schedule management plan governs how schedule should be managed. Schedule model should be defined, updated and maintained. So the schedule management plan becomes as a first input to this particular process. So if you talk about a language of a process is something which has inputs and which has tool and techniques are used, and which is kind of a process defines and which generates an output. And in this particular case, output is activity list, activity attributes and milestone list. So the first input for this process is schedule management plan, and the second would be scope. Now, can we define activities without knowing the scope? We cannot. Scope gives us that what is needed, what customer wants. Customer deliverables are something which drives the complete project. And that is why scope is an essential input for identifying activities. Once we know what we have to produce, then we need to identify how we have to produce it. So scope gives us what, and by putting our judgment, we identify what all steps, how part we have to perform, so we get the desired output. So second input for this is scope baseline. Now in a scope baseline, there are few critical elements which are of special interest. We get work breakdown structure, we get deliverables, we get constraints, we get assumptions. So these all forms the necessary inputs for our defined activity process. And two standard inputs, enterprise environmental factor and organization process asset. So enterprise environmental factor gives us which project management information system we have to use, which also tells us what kind of culture or a system or a structure is in place. So we talk about system or the structure of the organization, which also drives at what all kind of activities which we have to identify, since we also spoke about work authorization system while planning a schedule management plan, or by defining a schedule management plan, we have already taken care of authorization system, which is again and plays a role in identifying the list of activities. Organization process assets, we get templates from here, which is kind of essential element. Without template we cannot survive. We need something to start with. If we want to identify activities, we need something where there is given detail of all the attributes and which tells us that this is how we have to document our activities. So we get templates from here. We can also get historical information. So we can pick some similar type of project and see that how activities were defined there. So we get historical info from here, and we also get policies related to defining the activities. So they remain more or less same, but here the focus is more about defining the activities. Now these are the inputs, and we need to convert these inputs into an activity list, milestone list, and identify the attributes of it. So again, there will be a tool and techniques which helps us in getting this input converted into an desired output. The first tool and technique which comes into consideration, or which we want to discuss, is decomposition. Now we get work breakdown structure as an input. Now work breakdown structure represent the hierarchical representation of our deliverables. The second level or at a level, upper level, defines deliverables which are of big in size or at a summary level, and as we go at the end we get small deliverables. So the leaf part of the work breakdown structure is work package. Now from where we are getting this? We are getting this from the scope. Beside this we are also getting deliverables, constraints, and assumptions. Now this work package guides us the majority of activities. Rest of the activities are coming from assumptions, risks, or coming from the template or our organization style, because some kind of approval, some kind of project management processes need to be followed. So those activities will come from the templates and our environmental factors. But the project specific, which are very unique to the project, is primarily coming from this work package. Now what is work package? Work package is a leaf element of work breakdown structure. With the work breakdown structure, the complete project, the deliverable has been decomposed, and at the leaf level we get the work package. And this work package need to be further decomposed in activities. Now when I said how part, so these activities gives us a direction or tells us that how we are going to complete this work package. So majority of your project activities, especially which are specific to the project, would be coming from the decomposition of this work package. So first tool and technique of defined activities is decomposition. Now this helps us in getting the activity list, and also on the basis of constraints, assumptions, and the level of control needed because of our environmental factor or a recommendation coming from our template also tells us about the milestones. So by decomposing the bigger amount of work into the small activities and telling that how we are going to perform this work package results in set of activities which forms a defined activities output. The deliverables which is coming from scope baseline, the constraints which are coming from the scope baseline, and the template also may drive some of our milestones. Now, how do we do it? First, we decompose the work package and we create a good amount of activity list and which goes there. The second tool and technique is expert judgment. Now, in order to identify the activities out of scope or out of constraints or out of environmental factor, we need to put our expert judgment. There is another tool and technique which is the rolling wave planning. In sequence, PMBOK talks about rolling wave planning first and then expert judgment. So I am writing expert judgment as a point number 3 because now expert judgment is involved while doing a decomposition. Expert judgment is involved while identifying this scope and converting into the activities. The people who were involved in identifying scopes, who were involved in visualizing the project can play a good role in putting their judgment and helping us to identify milestones and activities and various attributes of those activities. There is another tool and technique which is called rolling wave planning. Now, rolling wave planning is an important terminology, it's an important technique, and this, you think that what is this rolling wave? This rolling wave represents a progressive elaboration. What does it mean? It means that in your project life cycle, for example, if you are thinking of a long duration project, say 6 months project, thinking of an activity which needs to be done at the month 6 at the level of days may be difficult or may not be required at this particular moment. So the activities which are in a near future may elaborate at the length, and activities which are coming at the later stage may remain at a summary level. If we look it in a Gantt chart format, in a Gantt chart we may have activities which are coming in near future, which is in this time frame looks like this. They are tasks, but activity which is expected to happen after 3-4 months may remain at a summary level. So we may have a summary bar and we don't have many details attached to it. It just says, for example, if you are developing a software, we may not plan the deployment while we are doing a requirement analysis. When we are doing a requirement analysis, we may just identify that there will be a deployment activity which will be run for 2 months or 1 month. But we not necessarily be elaborating that deployment activity at this particular moment, because we do a progressive elaboration, we do a rolling wave planning, and rolling wave planning and progressive elaborations are used synonymously. A lot of time they are used interchangeably, but in general progressive elaboration works good when we are talking about scope, and rolling wave planning looks good when we talk about the schedule or a time. And it is also linked with our requirement elicitation. For example, if we have many work packages and if this particular WBS element is not getting detailed or is not expected to get developed in next 6 months, we may not elaborate it at this particular time. We may only elaborate that this particular WBS which we are planning to develop in the coming months. So the rolling wave planning or progressive elaborations helps us in focusing on the elements or an activities which are in near term, and let us revise our activity list when we reach at the right time, because as we get more visibility about the project scope, we elaborate them at length. So this is how we generate an output of list of activities and milestones. Milestones are primarily coming from scope constraints, deliverables, customer expectations. Maybe schedule management plan is also recommending some of the milestones. Environmental factor can also drive some of the milestones, because our organization, for example, like in an organization, there may be a dashboard reporting which is happening on the basis of few milestones, and since that dashboard has to be presented for the senior management, that may drive identification of some of the milestones in all the projects. So these inputs plays a role in identifying the list of activities and list of milestones. An activity list is further identified with the basis of attributes. All these attributes may not get filled when we are in this particular process, but as we get further in our time management process, these attributes will get populated.